Coming up, Luka goes for a triple-double, but leaves the W behind in the process as the Brooklyn Nets snap their 7-game losing streak. We dive in on it all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and in not so surprising fashion, 111-108, the Brooklyn Nets get the win over the Lakers. They get some late game impressive play from D'Angelo Russell. We also have Noah Clowney in just his second game back from extended absence. Exactly what you anticipate. Yeah, the Lakers probably need LeBron if they want to have success down the stretch.
Well, rooting for wins has run its course. They went 0-7 since we did the old let's root for wins, and now that they've
Good
lost,
value though. I think good ROI in my opinion.
Excellent ROI on that. Time to move on from that back to every loss counts. That's where I am from here on out. Every loss counts. These are unacceptable, and dropping from 6th to 7th in the lottery odds, though people want to scoff at that, is meaningful. Like, this stuff matters, and the Nets just don't want to take and I guess credit to them, don't want to take the tack that some of these other teams have wanted to take, where they've, all but forfeited. But this game, pro tankers want to throw their hands up and be like, oh, of course the Lakers don't have LeBron in this one. And of course they come in and did not at full strength. So we can talk about the game, but overall the strategy of rooting for wins in an effort to trick the universe into actually getting losses has finally run out. 1-7 over the last 8.
Yeah, and I mentioned there 111-108, and you're right. Like this after our very successful campaign for rooting for wins and getting losses, it's funny how quickly these things pivot in terms of the standings, and we know getting down to the wire here between the Philadelphia 76ers and the implications around them getting into a top 6 position and not having to convey their pick to the Thunder, and then you also have the Toronto Raptors, which we talked about extensively as well. Those teams in the top 3. There's a funny thing I actually thought about before we get a layer deeper on this game. Is if you're the Wizards, and we talked about, man, no one's gonna be able to touch them. And even if somebody does touch them, even if you get a couple of wins down the stretch, top 3, all the same odds, right? So you get to kind of mess around a little bit down the stretch. This is the biggest problem with getting one too many victories early in the year. You can't take the full, hey, man, that's awesome. Like, way to take down the Lakers. Luka finally gets his chance to be the man that puts the Lakers on his shoulders while LeBron is down. Triple-double, who cares? Instead, it's every single win. You're probably going to look right to those standings and say, yeah, it may have cost us a little bit here, may cost us a few percentage points there. That being said, it was a fun game. Like the Nets are down double digits early in this one, 28-16, I think, at one point in the first quarter. And that easily is the most surprising part about this specific game. No Cam Thomas for the Nets in this one, and the Nets struggle offensively, and yet you manage to come back from double digits. That is 100% the indication that the Brooklyn Nets don't know anything about the tanking agenda. They don't believe in it. They don't prescribe to it, because you easily could have folded up shop in the first quarter and said, okay, another loss, 8 in a row. Let's move on to the next game.
And it's funny, too, because when you're watching the game, it's like a little hard to pinpoint exactly how it's happening, right? Like, they did dial the defense at times, and they really made it a point to, one, go after Luka on the defensive end and just try to limit him as much as possible, sort of like off ball, and make his life very difficult. I know that he ended up having the triple double, but it was like he was 8 for 26 from the field. I mean, he was like super, super, super inefficient. Like they really, really worked to make him basically miserable and said, hey, this is the anybody else show. Like, we know, like, it's going to be really hard for you, excuse me. And then anybody else, if they want to step up and beat us, then that's just what we're going to live with. But without LeBron, I mean, no Dorian Finney-Smith in this game. Jackson Hayes didn't play. I mean, those are minor things compared to the LeBron piece. But they worked overtime to make it, to really kind of exhaust Luka. And then on the other end, they went after him as much as possible too, defensively, because he's like just not exactly a defensive stalwart. So the Nets, because after you do that, like sort of like quasi analysis, was a little hard to figure out how it was happening for the Nets too. It's like, how are they doing this? Like, it's not like anyone had some crazy standout game. Clowney was good overall from the field, but D'Lo stunk. Like, it was, except for the big shot at the end. So it's like, when you watch this game, it's another one of these ones where it's a little tough to put your finger on exactly how the Nets are doing it outside of just sort of like Jedi mind trick stuff. And I don't know, does that make sense what I'm saying? Because watching this game, it's like, hey, when are the Lakers just going to win? Like that's how I kept thinking about this one. But then you watch Luka, he looks super tired. Like it was really hard for him. And then you can kind of like piece it together, but it's not just like one thing that happened. It seems like like with many of these Nets games, it's a combination of many things.
No, you mentioned D'Angelo Russell, just to put him in as we cap off the general over arc of this game, which yes, clutch bucket late. I mean, he's 2 of 9, 2 of 6, from beyond the arc, has 7 assists in this game,
Right.
8 points. We've done this before. It's like, if you looked in the box score and you saw X, you would think one of two things, right? No way that the Nets lost, no way the Nets won, no way the opposing, whatever. So triple double for Luka. If you just box score watch, and D'Angelo Russell has 8 points, you go and no Cam Thomas, right? From an offensive perspective, you say, okay, so the Nets lost by 15 to 20 points. Like, what do you want here? Okay, move on. Like, that's game. And yet somehow we turn around and say, no, down the stretch, nice bucket from him, nice bucket from Cam Johnson. There's a really important sequence that I want to get to here in a second, which effectively closes out the game late with Noah Clowney on an inbound sequence for Brooklyn. But yeah, it's one of those things too, where I poked a little bit of fun last night in the post game that we do for the network. Hey, for all of Luka's greatness, it's not like you look at him and say he'll lead the defensive way for your basketball team. And to your point, I think that the Nets and Jordi Fernandez made a very conscientious effort to say, like, let's just see if this guy can be as exhausted as possible for 48 minutes and still be able to get over the hump when you don't have LeBron James and a couple other players like you mentioned. Coming up here in a second, though, we got to get in. I want to get into this final sequence. Second game back for Noah Clowney off of his injury, and the first one was not pretty. But here we are, maybe getting the start of the home stretch for him and putting on some good film here, seeing how his development looks. He had a nice game on both ends of the floor. We'll look into that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Skims. You find out Skims making underwear for men. You got to get intrigued, hear about their quality from family and friends. You give it a try yourself. It's going to live up to the hype. If you have issues with underwear, look, fit, comfort, just finding the right style, Skim changes all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone. There you go. From boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Maybe you want to choose the boxer brief, perfect for active lifestyle. They move with you, never lose their shape, stay in place all day. Maybe they're working out, just running errands with the most comfortable and reliable underwear out there. Shop Skims Men at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcasts in the survey, select our show in the drop-down menu that follows at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and let them know that we sent you.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets, episode 111-108, winners over the LA Lakers. And it's funny, too, because it felt like one bucket alone for D'Angelo Russell is enough to be like, revenge game, baby. Like it only takes one in the NBA to make it like stuck it to you. You never should have let me go. But the closing sequence here, when the Lakers are still very much in it, and Luka is, in spite of everything the Nets did, still getting the ball 80 yards from the basket and knocking down some key triples to keep this one close and keep them within a single possession. Then there's just a total defensive breakdown. Now, I'm not saying that Noah Clowney is the player you need to defensively cue on, but the fact that he ends up just kind of drifting from the top of the key, two defenders out near the top trying to deny the inbounds on the ball, putting up pressure, he just drifts into the lane, gets it, goes ahead, gets the bucket, goes to the line, knocks down an extra free throw, and that effectively is the end of this one, despite a three-quarters court heave from Luka. It was one of those things that without LeBron James, maybe you'll say this is like the silliest way to frame this, but Luka Doncic is not known for his defense. And I don't know if LeBron James would be super attentive to, to that detail. If even having Hayes, a bigger body, what difference would make? Dorian Finney-Smith, like maybe it is as simple as that. But the fact that Luka's the guy that you need to look to as the leader on both ends in the closing sequences like this, and Noah Clowney just kind of walks to the basket, I did look at it as, that's probably a problem if you need Luka to like carry this team in the absence of LeBron James with his groin. I know that's probably one layer too deep on the result of that play.
Well, it wasn't Luka that got burnt on the back cut.
No, I know it's not. I know it's not him. Like, it's not him physically, but you're just like, but you're the best player on the team. It feels like it's your fault if your team collectively has a breakdown like that in a closing sequence.
They were definitely trying to hunt him late. Not every single possession, but they tried to get his guy into screening action. They stuck him on Zaire Williams, knowing that they wouldn't bring Zaire into like every action because they could just bring two to the ball because he's like not going to come off the ball. So they hit him a little bit later. Specifically on Zaire. On that back cut, though, I will say, it's not Luka's fault. Jared Vanderbilt had a very rough final game stretch because he gets lost on the he actually comes on the double that frees up Clowney, and then Gabe Vincent ends up having to foul him. But it was Vanderbilt's fault. Like Vanderbilt left him to be able to let it, and then. But the possession before that. The possession before that, when the Nets actually don't get a stop. The Lakers get a stop. Then the Nets miss the shot. And Vanderbilt just falls down. Claxton pulls the chair on him on the offensive rebound, and he just falls over. And the Nets have two guys under the basket because that was actually the play that ends up winning the game. So there were times. Well, I mean, there's a few plays that won the game, but that one I felt like if the Lakers had gotten that defensive rebound, they would have been within a possession.
Yeah,
on there, and I don't know. It felt like the momentum was going their way. I'm not really sure, but overall, no. Defensively, this is not a good basketball team. Like with Luka there, and just like the rest of the guys they had. Again, like no DFS, no LeBron. Like they're missing a lot of guys here. This team is just not a very, very good defensive team at all. Even with those guys, are not very good defensively, and without them, they're completely compromised. So it's like not shocking to me that the Nets won this one, but. Maybe in the next episode, we'll speak a little bit about, maybe we'll keep it more in this game. In the next episode, we'll talk about sort of like, what the Nets don't get by winning and what they do get by losing, where other teams have sort of just like, called the ball on this stuff. Overall, though, I'm not exactly surprised by the result. I mean, were you like shocked by the result of this game? I know sort of like that what helps the Nets and what doesn't, but the way they played this year, even with Luka, I took one look at the starting lineup. I was like, man, Nets have a real chance here. Like this team is bad. I mean, after Luka, it gets, and Austin Reeves, I suppose, the talent level on the Lakers team drops off an absolute cliff. Like they are just like not a bad team, but like I knew the Nets had a real chance in this one once I saw LeBron and was out combined with some of these other guys.
Yeah, you mentioned even Reeves, who's 3 for 14 from the field. He gets to the line 11 times in this game, so he still ends up putting up 17 points, but 10 assists. I mean, like it's a nice box score. There's a lot of nice box scores you could look at for Gabe Vincent. When you talk about making it difficult for Luka and anybody else, okay, here's the anybody else's, right? Like Austin Reeves has a bad shooting night. Gabe Vincent knocks down 6 and 9 from beyond the arc. But to your point, the Nets have proven all season long they are a snake bite team. Like, okay, maybe you're dealing with an injury. You're thinking about, you're the Lakers. We're thinking about, okay, is LeBron going to be healthy enough when we need to get to the playoffs? Like, how are we going to look? How long is he going to be out for? These other players. You're thinking about, it's almost comical. I assume that every opposing team thinks about 3 other things before the fact that they're playing the Brooklyn Nets on a night when they play the Brooklyn Nets. And that's your biggest mistake, because we said this 1,000 times this year. They grind you on the defensive end of the court. You saw in this game, Noah Clowney, I thought, did a really good job when we talk about being a pest out near the perimeter defensively. He seemed to be broken down in his stance a lot better maybe than we've seen earlier in the season. Like there's been an interesting juxtaposition about what his game looked like last year versus what we saw pre-injury this year. But there were just some things about that where the Brooklyn Nets only need to steal 3 or 4 possessions, pulling out the chair from Jared Vanderbilt, getting an easy bucket on the offensive glass, right? Like, those handful of sequences mean you're going to be in a game late. I think we talked about this. The Nets have a pretty good record relative to their overall when it comes to being within a couple of possessions late in games. So it's not like they don't have experience in this area because they've been so bad all year. They've been in close games, and I think Jordi Fernandez has certainly coached the team well to be able to, let's say, I think it's like 4 out of 11 times, 5 out of 12 times, get across the line, even against a good team. And all the injuries for the Lakers certainly play a massive factor in that.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, there's no surprise with this, right? There's no surprise that these are the outcomes of the game at this point. And
they're a bad roster, but they're like a hard playing team. Like, we've known that all year for Brooklyn, right? Like, it's not a talented roster, but nothing lacks for effort, nothing lacks for coaching, and you see how much of a difference that can make. Like, it legitimately makes a big difference. You can't just roll the balls out when you're not at 100% strength.
I'm being dead serious. I think they're one of the highest effort teams in the league. I think that they, like, in terms of effort compared to just overall talent, they have one of the, whatever that ratio is, which is not I don't think it's quantifiable, but I mean, it's probably quantifiable through some stats, right? But well, I mean, actually, it's probably quantifiable just through the defense. Honestly, that's actually probably where it is, because the defense has been legit good for longer stretches this year, and that probably is the quantifiable way to say like the effort is higher, because defense is a schematic thing, and you actually have to understand what you're doing defensively too. But it requires like tons of locked in effort the whole game. The offense requires effort too, but you can get by on having a Luka Doncic on your team, right? And like that's going to raise your offensive floor. Like you can't really do that defensively. Like you can have good defenders, like you can have Rudy Gobert on your team, and like it's going to raise your defensive floor pretty considerably, because he's going to be able to sort of clean up a lot of the other problems around it. But there's like not tons of guys like that. So at that point, when you look at just like straight up effort, when you look at where the defensive rating has been for them at times in the season, that is probably the way to quantify. It's like, oh, like this team brings it on a super, super high effort level every single night. They can't, it's a struggle for them to score. They're going to get in rock fights often. But if you get into one of these games with them and you get late, like it'll make it super annoying for you. Like it's going to be like, they are just going to make this stuff super annoying. And schematically, they are locked in on what they're trying to do. Like Jordi Fernandez has them bought in on both like the defensive side and the everyone wants us to tank and we don't want to do that side. Like players are for sure bought it on that too. Like, and so I don't know. Oh, I mean, you could see it. You could see it in the end of this game too. I mean, these guys, credit to them. They super really want to win.
Super annoying is the way to describe the Brooklyn Nets to the opposition, to their own fan base, to everybody, right? Like it's the right phrase to use on so many different levels potentially for this team. Coming up here in a second, it was a nice performance from Cam Johnson in this game, but then ultimately, what does it mean? What does it mean to impact your tank and the agenda as we look at the schedule going forward? We'll do that here to close things out in just one moment.
Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. Your home should reflect your style. With Wayfair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh, tackling a big home project, Wayfair has everything you need all in one place. At Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece, no matter your space or budget. From cozy furniture to stylish decor to kitchen essentials to outdoor must-haves, Wayfair has it all, and at prices that fit your budget. Look, you're looking for a rug to tie the room together. You don't want the room to tie the rug together, but you do want to go the other way. Wayfair's got that for you. Makes it easy to compare styles, order super fast, free delivery. Love to hear that. Head over to wayfair.com. Find something that's just your style today. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, so as we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode 111 to 108, winners are the Brooklyn Nets. They snapped the 7-game losing streak, and in the process, maybe alienate another segment of the fan base because they obviously are playing in those tank waters, something that we'll probably watch here as we move forward. But the other part about it here is, when you look inside this game, there's a couple of things. You mentioned Zaire Williams, like it's a 2 for 10 night for him. He's 1 of 8 from 3, but there's 9 rebounds, there's 2 steals, there's 2 blocks. There's like some nice defensive sequences where he's actually on Luka, and I think it does a good job just kind of staying on his hip. And he's not overcommitting defensively and crowding him. He's just making it annoying, to use the phrase from last segment, just making it like a bother for Luka on every possession. Then you get into, how do the Nets win this game with only 8 points from from D'Angelo Russell? Well, you probably go and say Keon Johnson, who struggled with his shot all season long, he'll go ahead and give you 3 or 4 from beyond the arc, 6 of 10 from the field, give you 18 points to go along with his 3 assists. And then maybe if we're trying to encapsulate annoying, Cam Johnson, I think it's like late in this fourth quarter, he dribbles his way from the left wing into the paint through 3 defenders in what looks like Carl Winslow dribbling the basketball on Family Matters, where it's like butt out, barely has his hand on the ball. Like it looks like rec league stuff, and then just kind of elevates and does a little push floater. I was like, boy, if you're the Lakers and that doesn't make you want to drag your carcass back to the locker room before the game's actually over, that was it. Because it was a good game from Johnson, but it was also like old man energy with a couple of sequences that he had in this game.
This is what I mean about watching this team, because if you watch the whole game, you'd be hard pressed. I'll be honest with you. If you watch the whole game and you didn't have the score on, I think you would have thought the Nets lost. I feel like that would be, I never have a great way to also quantify this feeling, but this one, it's like, if I wasn't allowed to see the score, what would I think would be happening here? Usually that happens when there's not like one dominant performance, right?
Yeah.
Like usually that happens where you kind of tricks your mind into thinking, okay, well, what's happening here? Because there really wasn't a dominant performance. Like you said, Cam Johnson was fine, 18 points. Keon Johnson, I never know. Is he good or bad? Like I never know about Keon Johnson. Like, is he what is he? Is he really good or is he totally stink? I just
He's
can't
a Brooklyn Net. I'll tell you what he is. That's what he is.
He's what I just simply can't figure. I'm done trying to figure that one out. And like you probably noticed that Clowney is draining some threes and has probably been pretty active. But after that, like you'd be hard pressed again to like really figure it out. And then you go to the box score, and again, if you heard the Lakers shot 48% from three on 40 attempts, would you think the Nets lost by 15 or 22? Like, exactly. Like, where would you think they end up? Because that's what happened. The Lakers shot 48% from three. Nets shot 40%. Lakers shot 80% from the line. I mean, these stats make no sense. The Lakers. All right.
By the way, the more stats you read, the less it makes sense when you look at the.
Okay. So the Lakers shot. Yeah. So the Lakers shot 48% from three and 79% from the line. The Nets shot 40% from three, so not bad, and 63% from the line on way more attempts. Nets win. Like it's just like nothing ever makes sense. Like it's just like nothing about the turnover game. The Nets win, so I guess you try to figure it out there. But again, like if you were to watch this game with no score, I'm dead set on this one. You would not think the Nets have won. And I think that just defines a lot of the stuff that's sort of happened for this season because like you rolled through some of the box score stuff. We talked about some of these plays. It's not like one defining moment with this stuff. It's just they death by 1,000 paper cuts you. And at the end of the game, you sort of stare up and you're like, we lost? How? Like that was close?
Like, yeah. Even if, by the way, I'm sure there's worlds, even if you beat the Nets when you're the team you go to the locker room, we beat them by 6 points. That's how
that 7-game losing streak wasn't like them getting blown out. Like there was a lot of decent amount of close games in there, right? Like the Nets that kind of like just pulled the loss out at the very end. Like it's not like they've been getting just run over during these times. And I just think that that's sort of like indicative of what's happened this whole season.
It's fantastic because I was trying to think about, how do you quantify the Nets being able to win these games? And you think about, the hustle plays, as you mentioned, loose balls, deflections, that kind of stuff. Listen, the Nets are bottom third in deflections in the NBA. 21.8 is the Oklahoma City Thunder. That makes sense. The Brooklyn Nets in that category are giving you something in the 15 range. I lost track of that stat there. The other one, you'd say, well, loose balls recovered. Like that day, come on. Those are 50-50. Who's gonna get there? Who's going to be the hero? Now, the best team in the league is, again, Oklahoma City Thunder with 6 per game. The Nets are 4.3, and that's third worst in the league. So there's not even some of these hustle metrics that you can go over and look at and say, oh, maybe that's the difference. Which is probably why a segment of the fan base does get so frustrated. You watch a game like this, and there's really not a discernible reason to understand how they win this game outside of you're never going to get a possession off. And we've said this before all year. Really good teams, some of the best teams, take possessions off because they're that good, because they have the talent level, because they'll make that extra shot, because they'll get that extra possession, wherever they end up needing it. But in a game like this, when you don't have LeBron and you don't have Dorian Finney-Smith and you don't have Jackson Hayes, all of a sudden, like you can't afford to give up 1 or 2 possessions. Jared Vanderbilt, I'm not picking on him. He can't afford to have the chair pulled out from underneath him. You can't do it. You can't afford to let Keon Johnson have one of the best shooting games of his season on a night when they play against you. Like it's so fascinating to look at some of these numbers and think about what the post-game conversation is for a team that loses to the Nets, specifically teams that are going to the playoffs, that have aspirations when they get there, they're planning on winning a first round of a basketball series in the NBA playoffs, to go into the locker room and say, like, where did it go wrong? Was it Cam Johnson 6 of 14? Was it Nick Claxton 6 of 7? Maybe, all right, guys, maybe it was that. Maybe we didn't do a good enough job boxing him out. Well, he only had 6 rebounds, right? Day'Ron Sharpe came in his 17 minutes, gave you 7 boards like he does. But there's no stat here that jumps off the page where you go, oh, guys, that's why we lost to the Nets last night by 3. There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Turnovers.
To the Lakers and say that this is why it happened.
Turnovers is probably about it, right? Like 15-7 turnover game. Like and like that's which is again like
7 turnovers for the Nets that's probably a very good stat to look at. You know what? Great stat, man. I'll let you take it. But like the Nets, for all the things they do well, are also careless with the basketball on a lot of nights because they don't have the talent level. So the fact that you keep yourself under in single digits and get 15 from LA, that might be the easiest one in this game to point to.
Yeah, the two stats are turnovers, where if you win, by 8 turnovers, and if you just figure those are going to be extra possessions, like that's how you make up the difference in the other team getting to the line and shooting well, and the 3-pointers. Like that's really actually the only way to do it, right? It's just like to have more possessions. So I think
and
like that's the one.
19 points off turnovers, the Nets. Like, so also did an excellent job converting those 15. 4 points off of the 7 for LA.
Great call. And the two ways to do it are to win the turnover battle and to win the offense rebound battle, because you just maintain it's essentially extra possessions, right? Because the only way to overcome increased efficiency on the other end is to just have the ball more, right? Like just have more bites at the apple, which is essentially what the Nets did by getting the turnovers and getting offensive rebounds, which again is indicative of what I would call hustle, right? Like the hustle stats. Offensive rebounds feels like a hustle stat, right? Like, I mean, there's some schematic things you can do with offensive rebounding by selling out and making sure that like you want to just like crash the offensive boards. Some teams don't want to do that. Turnovers, they are what they are. But those two things, plus just making Luka's life miserable on the efficiency, which we started from the beginning, like that's kind of how you tell yourself the story from the rest of it. It's like get extra possessions and make the other team's best player like have it really tough. I get that's it. I mean, that's not high level analysis, but it kind of is.
Well, by the way, the turnovers and taking 5 more shots than the other team, it's how you look at 41% from the field versus 43.5% for LA, and how you look at 40% from beyond the arc to 47.5% from beyond the arc for LA. Took 5 more 3-point attempts in this game. That's the shot difference overall, 90 to 85, and that's the 3-point attempt difference, 18 made to 19. Like, you close the gap on all these margins, but there's more stats in the box score that suggest, again, the Nets should have lost this game, but they win. And that's been the theme of their season when it comes to some of these matchups.
All right, we'll break down some of the lottery odds. I'll tell you the worst thing that happens for me is when the Nets win these games. It was real easy when they were losing, because I could have best of both worlds. I could root for the wins and then not have to get into it with the people that don't understand why tanking odds are meaningful, even though the ideas around it are stupid, but like the odds are meaningful and quantifiable. The worst thing that happens for me is I'm just going to spend, I already know what's going to happen here. I'm going to spend all day arguing with people why the Nets should not want to win these games. It was the losing streak did me the biggest favor in the world by just not having to do it.
Well,
now they win.
The Nets have the Cavs again coming up tonight, so we're going to come right back around with post-game conversation tomorrow on that one. So you don't even have to discuss this, Doug, all the way until potentially Thursday. I mean, just enjoy the week.
Okay, well, there you go. That makes me feel a little bit better. Make me feel better also by just going and subscribing over on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Totally free for you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, over on YouTube. Leave a comment, leave a 5-star rating. These are very easy. It's like 4 clicks. I just described to you. Sounded like a lot of words. It was like 4 clicks. Yeah. 4 clicks, and the number one way to help the show: subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
The secret to humor is surprise, and that is one Aristotle.
Oh my goodness. R.I.P. One of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.